At 11:43 UTC on April 9, 2026, 73 commercial vessels operating in the Indian Ocean simultaneously disabled their automatic identification system transponders within a 12-minute window. The ships, ranging from very large crude carriers to container vessels carrying approximately $2 billion in cargo, vanished from every commercial maritime tracking platform monitoring global shipping lanes. When the transponder blackout was complete, roughly 18% of all crude oil currently in transit to European and Asian markets was no longer visible to insurers, port authorities, or naval forces responsible for freedom of navigation operations. The vessels did not sink. They did not divert to unauthorized ports. They simply disappeared from the digital infrastructure that has governed maritime commerce for the past 2 decades. Subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications before going any further. What happened in the Indian Ocean is not simply a technical malfunction or coordinated piracy event. It is a deliberate operational demonstration whose implications extend directly into the insurance mathematics that determine what you pay for gasoline, heating oil, and every product that moves by container ship. The pace at which this situation is evolving means you cannot afford to be behind this analysis when the next phase of whatever is being executed becomes impossible to ignore. The analysis that connects documented events to the economic consequences already affecting commodity markets is here. To understand the full weight of what this transponder blackout represents, it is necessary to first understand what the automatic identification system actually does for global maritime commerce, because this was not an attack on individual ships. It was an attack on the trust architecture that allows $22 trillion in annual seaborne trade to function without constant military escort. Every commercial vessel over 300 gross tons is required by international maritime law to broadcast its position, speed, course, and cargo manifest continuously through AIS transponders. This system was implemented after the September 11th attacks, specifically to prevent vessels from being used as weapons or smuggling platforms without detection. Lloyd's of London and the international insurance syndicates that underwrite maritime risk base their actuarial calculations on the assumption that every insured vessel can be tracked in real time. Port authorities schedule berth assignments and customs inspections based on AIS arrival predictions. Naval forces conducting freedom of navigation patrols distinguish between legitimate commercial traffic and potential threats by monitoring AIS signatures. The Indian Ocean routes where these 73 vessels went dark carry 42% of all seaborne crude oil moving from Persian Gulf production facilities to Asian refineries. They carry 37% of containerized manufactured goods moving from Asian export hubs to European consumer markets. For energy security, supply chain predictability, and naval threat assessment, these specific shipping lanes have no equivalent alternative. Rerouting around Africa adds 14 to 18 days to transit times and increases fuel costs by 8 to $3 million per voyage for a standard VLCC. For container ships operating on just-in-time inventory models, even a 7-day delay cascades into factory shutdowns and retail stockouts measured in billions of dollars. That geographic and economic reality is the strategic context without which the transponder blackout cannot be properly understood. Whoever orchestrated this event did not disrupt one of several shipping routes. They disrupted the only economically viable route that exists for nearly half of global energy flows. The technical execution reveals sophistication that maritime security analysts are examining with increasing urgency. AIS transponders are not connected to a vessel's primary navigation or propulsion systems. They are standalone units specifically designed to be difficult to disable without physical access to the equipment. Each transponder broadcasts on 2 VHF frequencies simultaneously, creating redundancy that makes accidental failure extremely unlikely. The transponders are powered independently and include backup battery systems that activate automatically if primary power is interrupted. For 73 vessels to experience simultaneous transponder failure within a 12-minute window requires either physical tampering with equipment on every ship or a coordinated electronic warfare capability that can jam or spoof AIS signals across an area exceeding 2 million square kilometers. Maritime domain awareness specialists at the United States Naval Forces Central Command have confirmed through multiple independent sensor platforms that the vessels in question continue to operate normally. Synthetic aperture radar satellites tracked 41 of the 73 ships through cloud cover and darkness during the transponder blackout. The vessels maintained course and speed consistent with normal commercial operations. Their navigation lights remained active and compliant with international maritime regulations. Radio communications between ships and coastal stations continued without interruption on standard commercial frequencies. The ships are physically present and operationally functional. Only their AIS signatures have been eliminated from the tracking networks that global commerce depends upon. This presents two possible explanations, neither of which offers reassurance to the insurance underwriters now reviewing risk exposure across their entire Indian Ocean portfolio. The first possibility is that crew members on 73 vessels operating for dozens of different shipping companies registered in 17 different flag states simultaneously decided to disable their AIS transponders in violation of international maritime law and their employment contracts. This would require coordination across language barriers, corporate hierarchies, and competing economic interests that make such collective action implausible without external coercion or incentive structure that has not yet been identified. The second possibility is that a state or non-state actor has developed and deployed an electronic warfare system capable of selectively jamming or spoofing AIS transponders across oceanic distances without affecting other radio frequency systems that vessels depend upon for navigation and communication. This would represent a capability that maritime security establishments in NATO countries have publicly stated does not exist outside theoretical research programs. According to assessments from the Office of Naval Intelligence reviewed as recently as January 2026, AIS jamming technology capable of oceanic-scale deployment remained at least 5 to 7 years away from operational readiness. If you are finding this analysis valuable, subscribe to the channel right now and share this video with anyone trying to understand what is actually happening beneath the surface of official maritime security briefings. When the insurance market response to this event begins affecting freight rates and consumer prices, when the next demonstration of whatever capability is being tested here escalates to a scale that can no longer be characterized as isolated technical malfunction, the analysis connecting operational developments to economic consequences will be here. Evidence first. What it means for your household budget always. The economic consequences of 73 vessels disappearing from tracking systems have already begun cascading through commodity markets and insurance syndicates in ways that will reach consumer prices within weeks, regardless of whether the ships reappear on tracking networks tomorrow. Lloyd's of London convened an emergency session of its Joint War Committee on April 11th, 48 hours after the transponder blackout began. The committee voted to reclassify the Indian Ocean shipping lanes between the Strait of Hormuz and the Malacca Strait as elevated risk zones requiring additional war risk premiums for hull and cargo insurance. That reclassification increases insurance costs for every vessel transiting these routes by an average of 0.7 to 1, 2% of cargo value per voyage. For a very large crude carrier hauling 2 million barrels of crude oil worth approximately $160 million at current prices, the additional insurance cost ranges from $12 million to $92 million per voyage. That cost is not absorbed by shipping companies or oil producers. It is passed directly to refineries, which pass it to distributors, which pass it to retail gasoline stations. The mathematical path from Lloyd's Committee decision to the price you pay at the pump is direct and quantifiable. Industry analysts at Energy Intelligence Group estimate that if war risk premiums remain at current elevated levels for 90 days, average retail gasoline prices in the United States will increase by 11 to 17 cents per gallon. In the European Union, where fuel taxes represent a larger percentage of retail price, the increase ranges from 8 to 13 cents per litre. The container shipping sector faces parallel insurance cost escalation with more complex downstream effects. Container ships moving manufactured goods from Asian factories to European and American retail markets carry cargo valued at an average of $380 million to $520 million per voyage. The additional war risk premium of 0.7 to 1, 2% represents $66 million to $24 million per vessel. These costs are distributed across thousands of individual shipments in a single container load, but they accumulate. According to freight rate analysis from Drury Maritime Advisors, sustained war risk premium increases of this magnitude translate to freight rate increases of $140 to $180 per 40-foot equivalent unit container. Those costs appear in retail prices for electronics, furniture, appliances, and every consumer product that moves in container ships. The petroleum insurance market faces a more fundamental crisis than simple premium increases. The actuarial mathematics of maritime war risk insurance depend absolutely on the ability to track vessel locations in real time. Underwriters calculate risk exposure based on which conflict zones a vessel transits, how long it remains in elevated risk areas, and whether it deviates from approved shipping lanes. When a vessel's AIS transponder goes dark, underwriters lose the data foundation that allows them to price risk accurately. They are being asked to insure assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars, traveling through regions where their location cannot be verified continuously. Multiple insurance syndicates have responded by invoking force majeure clauses that allow them to suspend coverage for vessels that cannot maintain continuous AIS broadcast. At least 18 commercial vessels scheduled to load crude oil at Persian Gulf terminals during the week of April 15th have been unable to secure insurance coverage for Indian Ocean transit. The vessels remain in port. The crude oil remains undelivered. Saudi Arabia's state oil company Aramco reported on April 12th that approximately 4.7 million barrels per day of scheduled crude exports have been delayed pending resolution of insurance coverage disputes. That represents roughly 5% of global crude oil supply effectively removed from markets not by production cuts or military blockade, but by insurance industry unwillingness to underwrite untrackable voyages. The commodity futures markets have registered this supply disruption with immediate price responses. Brent crude oil futures for June delivery increased by $8.40 per barrel in the 72 hours following the initial transponder blackout. West Texas Intermediate crude increased by $7.90 per barrel over the same period. These increases reflect not actual supply shortage but anticipated supply shortage if insurance markets do not resolve the tracking verification problem within the next 14 to 21 days. Every dollar per barrel increase in crude oil prices translates to approximately 4 cents per gallon at United States retail gasoline pumps after refining margins and distribution costs. The $7.90 increase already recorded represents 19 cents per gallon in price pressure moving through the supply chain toward consumer prices. The broader strategic question that emerges from assembling all of these technical and economic elements is the one that maritime security analysts across ideological divides are beginning to ask with increasing urgency. Who benefits from demonstrating the ability to make global shipping invisible without physically attacking the ships themselves? The transponder blackout achieves several strategic objectives simultaneously, and understanding those objectives reveals which actors possess both capability and motivation to execute an operation of this technical sophistication. First, the blackout demonstrates that the maritime domain awareness systems that NATO navies have invested billions of dollars developing over the past 2 decades can be neutralized without firing a shot or crossing any threshold that would justify military response. The United States Navy maintains continuous satellite surveillance, aerial reconnaissance, and surface vessel patrols across the Indian Ocean specifically to ensure freedom of navigation and early warning of threats to commercial shipping. Those systems detected that something had happened to the 73 vessels. They confirmed through alternative sensors that the ships remained operational, but they could not prevent the event, could not identify who was responsible, and cannot currently reverse the tracking blackout. That operational gap between detection and prevention is precisely the kind of capability demonstration that adversaries conduct to probe defensive limitations without triggering escalatory response. Second, the blackout creates economic leverage through insurance market disruption that operates entirely within legal commercial frameworks. No international law has been violated by the ship's crews if they claim AIS equipment malfunctioned. No act of war has been committed if electronic interference can be attributed to atmospheric conditions or solar activity affecting VHF radio propagation. Yet the economic consequences through insurance premium increases and supply delays impose real costs on Western economies without providing any clear basis for diplomatic complaint or military response. This is exactly the kind of grey zone operation that sophisticated state actors employ when they want to demonstrate capability and impose costs while maintaining plausible deniability. Third, the blackout exposes the fragility of the trust architecture that global commerce depends upon. The automatic identification system works because everyone assumes that transponder data is reliable and that vessels will maintain continuous broadcast. Once that assumption is broken, even temporarily, it cannot be fully restored. Insurance underwriters now know that AIS data can disappear without warning. Port authorities now know that vessel arrival predictions may be unreliable. Naval forces now know that their maritime domain awareness has exploitable gaps. That knowledge changes risk calculations permanently. Even if every vessel's transponder is restored tomorrow, the insurance premiums will not return to previous levels because the vulnerability has been demonstrated. The question of attribution remains officially unresolved, but the technical requirements for executing this operation narrow the list of capable actors substantially. Jamming AIS transponders across 2 million square kilometers of ocean requires either land-based high-frequency transmission facilities with power outputs exceeding anything commercially available, or aerial platforms capable of sustained electronic warfare operations at ranges that most military aircraft cannot achieve without aerial refueling. Coordinating simultaneous jamming across 73 specific vessels requires real-time intelligence about which ships are operating in the target area and technical capability to selectively target those vessels without affecting every ship in the Indian Ocean. Only a handful of state actors possess the combination of signals intelligence, electronic warfare capability, and operational security required to execute an operation of this precision. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps maintains extensive maritime surveillance networks throughout the Persian Gulf and has repeatedly demonstrated willingness to conduct asymmetric operations against shipping in ways that avoid direct military confrontation. China's People's Liberation Army Navy has deployed electronic warfare vessels throughout the Indian Ocean as part of its Belt and Road Initiative maritime security operations and possesses technical sophistication for selective AIS jamming. Russia's naval forces maintain submarine and surface vessel presence in the region and have demonstrated electronic warfare capabilities in other theatres that could potentially be adapted for maritime domain disruption. The absence of any state claiming responsibility or even acknowledging the event occurred suggests that this is an operational test rather than a diplomatic signal. State actors conducting grey zone operations typically want the target to know who is responsible, even if they maintain official deniability. The message is more powerful when the adversary understands who demonstrated the capability. The complete silence from all potential responsible parties suggests that this event may be a proof-of-concept demonstration for internal assessment rather than external messaging. The naval and commercial response to this situation will determine whether the transponder blackout remains an isolated incident or becomes a recurring operational tactic that fundamentally changes maritime security assumptions. The United States Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain, has increased aerial surveillance flights over affected shipping lanes by approximately 40% since April 10th, according to flight tracking data from commercial aircraft monitoring services. Additional P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft have been deployed from Diego Garcia to provide continuous coverage of the eastern Indian Ocean routes, where the majority of the 73 vessels were operating when their transponders went dark. These surveillance increases provide redundant tracking capability that does not depend on AIS transponders. Synthetic aperture radar satellites can track vessels through weather and darkness. Aerial reconnaissance can photograph and identify ships visually. But these alternative tracking methods are expensive, resource-intensive, and cannot be sustained indefinitely across the entire Indian Ocean. The economic model of global maritime commerce depends on automated tracking systems that require minimal military oversight. If every commercial vessel requires satellite and aerial monitoring to verify its location, the cost structure of maritime security becomes unsustainable for the naval forces providing it. The commercial shipping industry faces a parallel decision about AIS reliability. If transponder data cannot be trusted, the entire regulatory framework built around mandatory vessel tracking collapses. Port authorities cannot schedule berths efficiently. Customs agencies cannot predict cargo arrivals for inspection planning. Search and rescue operations cannot locate vessels in distress quickly. The efficiency gains that automated tracking systems have provided over the past 20 years disappear if the underlying data infrastructure is demonstrated to be manipulable by hostile actors. Here is where the complete operational picture stands 17 days after the initial transponder blackout. 73 vessels carrying $2 billion in cargo remain invisible to commercial tracking networks. War risk insurance premiums have increased by 0.7 to 1, 2% across all Indian Ocean shipping lanes. Approximately 4.7 million barrels per day of crude oil exports from Persian Gulf terminals have been delayed pending insurance resolution. Brent crude prices have increased by $40 per barrel. No state actor has claimed responsibility. No diplomatic protests have been filed. The United States Navy has increased surveillance flights by 40%, but cannot identify who executed the operation or prevent recurrence. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. When the next phase of whatever capability is being demonstrated here escalates beyond isolated events, when insurance markets reach the point where Indian Ocean shipping becomes economically unviable without military convoy escort, when the attribution question is finally answered through operational pattern analysis or intelligence disclosure, the analysis connecting those developments to commodity prices and naval force posture will be here. This channel documents the operational realities that official briefings characterize differently. Leave one question in the comments before you go. Can automated maritime tracking systems survive in an environment where state actors have demonstrated the ability to selectively disable them? Or does global shipping revert to convoy models that dominated oceanic commerce before satellite navigation existed? Every response gets read and considered. This is the analysis that connects capability demonstrations to the prices you encounter when you fill your gas tank or wait for container ships to deliver inventory that retail depends upon.